The winter of 1936 stands as a monument to suffering in the American experience, a perfect storm of meteorological extremes, economic collapse, and human endurance that pushed the nation to its very limits. It was not merely a season of cold, it was a profound geological event of ice and wind that etched itself into the land and the collective memory of a generation already battered by the Great Depression. To understand what really happened that year is to weave together the threads of climatic aberration, agricultural ruin, societal struggle, and the eerie foreshadowing of the Dust Bowl's most catastrophic chapter. The narrative begins not in December, but in the autumn of 1935, as a stabilizing atmospheric pattern known as the North Atlantic Oscillation shifted into a phase that would funnel paralyzing Arctic air relentlessly southward. By mid-January 1936, this mechanism was fully engaged, and a continent began to freeze. The cold did not creep in, it assaulted. The first major blast arrived in the northern plains and upper Midwest around January 18th, with temperatures plummeting 40 degrees in mere hours. What followed was a siege of cold so intense and persistent that it defied imagination. From January 18th through February 15th, much of the nation lived in a deep freeze. The iconic cold readings remain staggering a century later. -60 degrees Fahrenheit in partial North Dakota, -58 degrees Fahrenheit in Dayton, Wyoming, -54 degrees Fahrenheit in McIntosh, South Dakota. The Mississippi River froze solid at St. Louis, with ice so thick people could walk across it, and the mighty Niagara Falls transformed into a silent, jagged sculpture of ice. Great Lakes shipping ground to a halt, with ice thicknesses on Lake Superior exceeding 3 feet, trapping and crushing steel-hulled freighters. The cold was a physical, invasive force. It froze livestock where they stood in barns. It caused trees to explode with cannon-like reports as their sap solidified and expanded. It made coal, the primary heating fuel, brittle and ineffective in furnaces. In cities like Chicago, where the mercury touched -26 degrees Fahrenheit, streetcar rails snapped, water mains burst by the thousands, and schools and businesses shut down for weeks. The cold was so profound that it created its own weather. Frost smoke rose from the ice-choked Great Lakes, and diamond dust, tiny ice crystals, floated in the air, glittering under a pitiless sun. Yet the cold itself was only one actor in this tragedy. The real catastrophe emerged from its interaction with the man-made ecological disaster of the Dust Bowl. The preceding years of drought and poor farming practices had stripped the Great Plains of its anchoring grasslands. The topsoil, desiccated and lifeless, lay exposed. Then the deep freeze came. It locked that barren soil in an iron grip. When the inevitable powerful winds of the plains returned, unchallenged by vegetation, they did not pick up loose dirt, they scoured the frozen granular earth. This created a new, more horrific phenomenon, the snert storm, a blizzard of snow intermingled with dirt. These storms were apocalyptic. They were not the whiteouts of the north, but black blizzards that blotted out the sun at noon, a moving wall of frozen soil that sandblasted paint off cars, buried fences, and infiltrated every crack of homes already struggling to retain heat. The winter of 1936 thus became the chilling prelude to the worst Dust Bowl year, 1936 itself. It preconditioned the land for total erosion, ensuring that when the thaw finally came, the soil would be even more vulnerable to the catastrophic windstorms of the following spring and summer. Human life during this period was a relentless battle for survival, particularly for the rural poor. In isolated farmsteads across the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Minnesota, families were cut off for weeks. Snowdrifts, some as high as second-story windows, sealed them in their homes. The struggle was for heat and sustenance. With coal deliveries impossible, people burned corn, hay, and furniture. Food supplies dwindled. Stories emerged of families living on little more than boiled wheat and powdered milk. The threat of carbon monoxide poisoning from makeshift heaters was constant. Rural doctors, when they could be reached, reported treating severe frostbite and pneumonia as commonplace. Children stuffed newspapers into their coats for insulation and walked to school in designated snow tunnels carved between drifts. In towns, frost funds were established by charities to buy coal for the destitute, while Red Cross volunteers worked tirelessly to deliver food and blankets, often using sleds and skis. The psychological toll was immense. The endless cold, the howling winds filled with dirt and ice, and the crushing isolation compounded the existential despair of the Depression. It felt, to many, like a biblical trial. The economic impact was catastrophic, delivering a coup de grace to a rural economy already on its knees. The livestock death toll was unimaginable. Cattle, sheep, and poultry, already weakened by poor feed from drought-stricken crops, froze by the hundreds of thousands. Ranchers in Montana and the Dakotas could only watch as entire herds were lost in a single night. The frozen carcasses would litter the fields until the spring thaw, a grim landscape of staggering loss. The freeze also devastated winter wheat, a crop that relies on a protective snow blanket. The extreme cold without sufficient snow cover killed the roots, guaranteeing a failed harvest come summer. Orchards were wiped out, and the maple sugar industry in the Northeast was crippled as sap froze in the trees. The transportation paralysis stalled commerce nationally, and the cost of disaster response strained municipal and state budgets to the breaking point. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, the siege was broken by a rapid and devastating thaw. In early March, a Chinook wind roared over the Rockies and collided with the frozen heartland. Temperatures soared from -20 degrees to 50 degrees in a single day in some places. This sudden melt, acting on a snowpack laden with dirt and of immense depth, triggered the worst flooding in the region's history. Rivers, blocked by massive ice jams, overtopped their banks with violent force. The Ohio River, the Missouri River, and their tributaries became raging torrents. Cities like Pittsburgh, Louisville, and Omaha faced unprecedented inundation. The Great Flood of 1936, which crested in March, displaced over 1 million people, caused hundreds of millions in damage, and left a watermark of destruction on top of the frozen ruin. The winter had not simply ended, it had transformed into a new disaster, washing the frozen soil and the remnants of shattered lives towards the Gulf of Mississippi. What really happened during the coldest winter in U.S. history was a multidimensional national trauma. It was a stark lesson in climatic vulnerability and ecological interconnectedness. The winter proved that the disasters of the 1930s were not separate crises, the crash, the drought, the Dust Bowl, the cold, but intertwined facets of a single devastating epoch. It exposed the fragility of infrastructure, the precariousness of agriculture, and the profound resilience of ordinary people. Significantly, it also acted as a powerful catalyst for change. The sheer scale of the suffering, culminating in the Great Floods, helped galvanize public support for massive federal intervention. It added urgent impetus to New Deal programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps, which would plant over 200 million trees to create windbreaks, and the Soil Conservation Service, which would revolutionize land management practices. The disaster directly influenced the push for massive flood control and hydroelectric projects under the Tennessee Valley Corporation and the Army Corps of Engineers. In the end, the winter of 1936 was more than a statistical anomaly on a weather chart. It was a defining crucible. It tested the physical and moral fiber of a nation and demonstrated with brutal clarity the consequences of environmental neglect when combined with economic collapse. The generation that endured it would speak of it in hushed tones for the rest of their lives, a reference point for all hardship. It left an indelible mark on policy, on the land, and on the American psyche, a stark reminder of nature's power to humble human endeavor and the necessity of collective resilience in the face of unparalleled adversity.